Hurricane Lane dumped a historic amount of rain on the Big Island last year, causing major floods and damage. And it wasn't even a direct hit. The storm later caused flooding on Kauaʻi as well. At one point, Lane grew to a Category 5 storm. It was one of 2 tropical systems to cause damage in Hawaii last season. A new hurricane season starts soon. Is Hawaii prepared for hurricanes? Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of insights on PBS Hawaiʻi start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff. The forecast for the 2019 hurricane season here in the Central Pacific is for 5 to 8 tropical cyclones. That can mean anything from a tropical depression to a tropical storm or even a full-blown hurricane. Forecasters say there's a 70% chance of an above normal season fueled by El Nino conditions such as warm ocean temperatures and low wind shear. And it doesn't take a direct hit to wreak havoc. Hurricane Lane caused $7 million in damage on the Big Island, and Tropical Storm Olivia made landfall on 2 islands in Maui County. The threat is real. The key is preparation. Our guests tonight include the state's top emergency manager, a meteorologist, Honolulu's emergency coordinator, and an expert in preparing for natural hazards. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet your questions. And you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guests. Thomas Travis is the administrator of the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. He is a retired U.S. Navy captain appointed to the position in 2018. John Bravender is the warning coordination meteorologist for the Central Pacific Hurricane Center located at the UH Manoa campus. Hirokazu Toya is the director of the Department of Emergency Management for the City and County of Honolulu. And Dennis Wong is the Coastal Hazard Mitigation Specialist under the Sea Grant program at the University of Hawaii. He co-authored a Homeowners Handbook on how to prepare for natural hazards. Let me start off, though, with John Bravender. When we talk about hurricanes, tropical depressions, tropical storms, but it's all under the category of tropical cyclones, right? What's the difference between those 3 different things?
All those are different types based on wind speed. Tropical depression, winds less than 39 miles an hour. Tropical storm, 39 to 73. And then hurricane force winds, 74 miles an hour or greater. For our season outlooks, we talk about 5 to 8 tropical cyclones, including all of those, because it's one of those things where wind is one component, but things like rainfall is another big hazard, regardless of wind speed intensity.
Let me just quickly go through the wind speeds. When we have a hurricane coming, there's talk about, oh, it's Category 1, Category 2, Category 3, Category 4. And how are those differentiated? What's the difference between those?
Oh, those are all measures as you go stronger. Category 1, 1 and 2, 3 and above is considered major hurricanes, going as high as Category 5.
So a Category 3 is 111 plus, and then Category 130, Category 5, 157 miles an hour wind. That's like a tornado, isn't it?
Which actually both Lane and Walaka last year briefly reached Category 5 strength in the Central Pacific.
And then when we talk about 5 to 7, 5 to 8, or 6 to 8, what are we at? 5 to 8 this year. When was the last time you predicted 5 to 8?
The last time we had that was 2015.
And how many did you actually have?
2015.
I'm doing this to embarrass you, by the way.
Over the calendar year we had, or actually during the season we had 15. During the calendar year we had 16. And actually considering we even had one in January of 2017. So that was a very active year. Water temperatures were a lot warmer than they are now. Right now El Nino, so a weak El Nino, about less than 1 degree Celsius warmer than normal. 2015 were 2.5 degrees, which is very unusual, very strong. For El Nino conditions.
In 2015?
In 2015.
Okay. Tom Travis, when you hear this prediction, what goes through your mind? Are you expecting that this could be quite a heavy year?
From my point of view, it depends on where they go. We have graphs of hurricanes, I think it is 2015, in which all of the hurricanes were misses or near misses, and there wasn't much that happened. I just hope that we don't see more that come at us like Hurricane Lane or Hurricane Iniki. Those are the ones that I'm really interested in. So there's a probability, if there's more hurricanes, there's more of a probability that one of them will be a serious one. But it's the one that I'm worried about, not how many.
And then
storms.
let me take a quick look at another graphic we have that it's sort of like the years where we had the most storms over the last 4 decades or so. In 1982, there were 10, and we had Hurricane Eva. In 1992, 11, and we had Hurricane Iniki. 94, we had 11, but we didn't get hit. 97, 9, 2015, which was a horrifying year. And then 2018, we only had 6, but we had a lot of them come quite close. You know, how do you, Hiro Toya from the city and county, how early do you start gearing up? You know, people hear so many warnings during the course of a year. How do you keep it fresh when you have multiple storms? And then for your folks, when do you really start gearing up for an individual storm?
Well, really, the preparedness efforts are year-round. And so, of course, during the hurricane season, we have special consideration for being able to respond quickly. But you know, even during the off-season, we're going through preparedness. And for us, that means working with the whole community. And that means working with all levels of government, within the city and county of Honolulu, but also with the public and the community partners that we have. And you know, it really takes the whole community working together year-round to be really prepared for emergencies. You
know, Dennis Wong, your expertise is in the kind of the damage that's done by these storms.
That's right.
When we start talking about a Category 1 or Category 2 or Category 3, we've been pretty lucky, actually, in Hawaii, wouldn't you say? And also, tell me a little bit about what kind of damage you do expect if we got hit by even a relatively minor hurricane.
Well, general rule of thumb is that each category of hurricane produce 4 times the damage of the previous one. So a 2 will produce 4 times more damage than a 1, and a 3 will produce 16 times more damage than a 1. So it's a 4-time multiplier.
It's a multiplier.
Each time you go up, yeah, because the force on a building is not proportional to the wind speed. It's proportional to the square of the wind speed. So you can get a 33% increase in wind speed.
I'm a journalist. I don't do math. So.
Okay, but I'm saying, the wind speed's very important, and fortunately, it's more likely that we'll get weaker systems like a tropical storm or a Category 1. They're more likely to occur than a 2 or 3. But if there is like a hit like a 1 or a 2, it could cause significant damage, especially to older houses. So the first thing we encourage homeowners to do, if their house is built before 1988, to put in hurricane clips. That's the first thing.
We're going to go through a lot of the specific
Sure.
things, because you've got some props here. I'm looking forward to seeing those. But just give me a sense of numbers. Like if you were telling us earlier that a 1 or 2 level storm could still damage thousands of homes on Oahu. We're talking about.
Okay.
Now, right?
Well, this is a Pacific Disaster Center study. It was done in 2018. It's online right now. Category 1, they predict 3,800 houses damaged or destroyed on Oahu, but that does not consider topography, because with topography there's wind speed up, and again, the damage is proportional to the wind speed. For a Category 2, when they did an estimate for a Category 2 with the topography, they came out with an estimate of 52,000 houses damaged or destroyed. So that's why, really encouraging people to get on the ball and, work year-round to prepare, especially their houses.
Here, I'll tell you, when you hear numbers like that, how ready are we as a government or an island to deal with 50,000 damaged homes and God knows what else is damaged, right?
Yeah, and we work together with our partners every day to try to prepare as much as we can, but it's never going to be enough.
Yeah.
The reality is that when we have a major hurricane impact us, there's not going to be enough emergency responders. There's not going to be enough resources. So that's why really the message to the public is to prepare now so that you can survive on your own, help yourselves, help your neighbors if something were to happen. And we have some of the best first responders in the world, and we have great government services here, and we train and we plan. But really, at the end of the day, the true first responders when something like this happens would be the residents themselves.
You're on your own.
Yeah.
That's a significant possibility.
Here's a quick question from a viewer along these lines. If an Eva-like hurricane were to directly hit Oahu, what would be the impact today compared to 1982? John Bravender, what would be, I don't remember all the details of Eva, but it was a Cat 4 at least?
It would well, actually, it's any with this impacting Oahu in particular, considering that most of our goods and everything coming in through the state come through the port here. That's the big threat with that, is that anything that damage to the port would then impact the ability to bring in food, supplies, everything like that. So an impact like that to Oahu would be much more impactful across the state than what we saw before.
But since then, building codes have improved. I think that, Tom Travis, have you got a sense of how much damage an Eva would do to the state now than before? Are we better prepared than we were when we were hit by Eva?
I would expect that in some ways we're better prepared. That I think probably the Weather Service is more likely to give us good predictions. We're more likely to have studied the problem and understand exactly what's going to happen because we have better tools to understand where flooding is. We probably have better plans, but that's all more than offset by the tremendous increase in infrastructure that is served by the population and infrastructure.
Yeah.
So my prediction is that it would be a much more serious event now than it was in 1982.
Yeah.
Dennis?
Well, Eva occurred in '82. So after Eva, on Oahu, they changed the building codes so that after '88, every house has hurricane clips. So all those houses built after '88, they'll be better off because they have hurricane clips in '88, and after '95, they have what's called a continuous load path, which ties the roof all the way to the foundation. Those houses will be better. But the ones that are still vulnerable are all the ones built before '88 on Oahu. And that's why we're trying to convince everyone to put in hurricane clips, because it's not that hard to do.
I just returned from a trip to Florida, and my brother has a house there, and his is very recently built. And in Florida, they name the building standards after the last hurricane that whacked them. So so his are built to the X standard, and then now there's a new standard from the last hurricane that's even tougher.
Yeah.
But he was saying that you could specifically say what your house is rated to resist.
Yeah.
But do we have anything like that here? Are we capable of saying, oh, this neighborhood could handle this, or this neighborhood could handle that?
It's not by neighborhood. Again, it's by when the house was built, because there are two distinct benchmark dates on Oahu, and it's going to differ for each island, and it's in the book that we wrote. '88, they required hurricane clips. '95, they required the load path. And actually, in 2012, there's a state building code that requires a continuous load path tying the roof to the foundation, and also requires window protection or a safe room. These are some of the things that are required in Florida. So a lot of it's not built by neighborhood, it's by the year the house was built. And the thing is, each counties are sort of like implementing that building code a little different, some in a way that's relaxing the standard.
But if you had, what was interesting to me when talking to my brother was that he said that, oh, my house is good up to a category 4.
Right.
And his is brand new, almost brand new, it may be 7 or 8 years old, and it's got all this stuff on it, plus he's got bolts around every opening. And so he's basically saying, I think it'll handle a 5. But I mean,
Probably.
really, even if your house was built after these standards, a 4 or a 5, you can't guarantee any house is going to survive, right? I mean, anybody could pitch in on this, but I mean,
Okay, well, when we went to Rockport after Harvey was
Texas.
a 4 when it made landfall in 2017. And there were some houses that did pretty well over a category 4 because they were built to a new building code, and it was, I mean, they had the complete load path, and they probably designed it to 140 mile per hour wind speed. The engineers like calculate wind speed and uplift forces and all that. They put the proper fasteners related to that, and it had like impact resistant glass, and so they did pretty well. There are houses that can survive it, and even older houses on Oahu, they can be retrofitted to make them do better, like during a 1 or a 2, which you may say, well, what about a 4? But actually a 4 is not, it's going to be as likely as a 2, or, you know.
okay, let me move to another viewer question here. This I think is for John Bravender, and then maybe Tom. Is the Big Island a hurricane killer? They all seem to break apart there.
From a meteorological standpoint or weather standpoint, we've seen this with Isel, we've seen this with Darby, that when tropical cyclone makes landfall and hits the Big Island or hits any terrain island, really, it'll get severely disrupted. Isel weakened rapidly in 2014 when it passed through. Those are from direct impacts with the islands. From a larger scale influence, that's not as obvious. One of the big questions we get is with steering, do they deflect them away? Actually, some studies have shown that winds from like 20,000 feet to 40,000 feet in the atmosphere are what have the biggest influence for steering a hurricane.
Is that what we call the wind shear? Is that what's...
Wind shear is the changing wind as the wind changes with height. If it's not changing with height, if it's all from the same direction, it's those in the high atmosphere that have the biggest influence on where a hurricane moves. So obviously the mountains would be deflecting the winds below 14,000 feet. So it wouldn't have as much impact or as much influence as something like we've seen actually making landfall.
So as we see hurricanes coming, the ones that are heading kind of toward the Big Island, as opposed to the ones that go deep south and come up, or the ones that go high north and come down, which ones should we be more worried about, or does it not make a difference?
Actually, any of them we should be worried about, but the ones with the most damage potential are ones tracking south and coming up northward. Staying south, staying over warm water, maintaining strength. Those are generally stronger wind speeds. And if the large-scale weather pattern is right, and if there's little wind shear, they can move northward, turn northward, and maintain their strength. That's what we saw with the Niki.
The other question that we had is that we're talking a lot about wind, but rain is also is a huge issue. Are you guys in an emergency area? Is it the wind or the rain you worry about most?
Well, we consider hurricanes to be a triple threat. So we have the wind, rain, and storm surge. So we have to look at each component. And that's what makes the messaging around hurricanes a little bit challenging for us, because it's not just one thing that's happening, and it's happening over time. People see it approaching. And so we're really trying to work on our messaging around that, and really giving public the information and having transparency on what it is that can impact them, so they can figure out what they can do about it.
So let's talk about that a little bit more, Tom Travis with the state. How do you do this messaging? How do you prepare? I mean, if somebody's coming from a certain direction, that there's going to be a big storm surge in this area, and can you adjust to that, or do you just have to sort of be ready for anything and then react?
As the storm approaches, the messaging becomes more specific. So if Hurricane Lane is 2 days from landfall and is starting to turn to the south, as occurred last year, at that point we should be talking about storm surge. We should be talking about wind, and to some degree rain. The persistent one is rain. Our experience is it doesn't, how close we come to landfall doesn't seem to affect the dangers of the rain.
And it seems
as
like the
much
rain's
as
very unpredictable. I think that we at Hawaii News Now, we would send a crew, and the storm's heading for the east side of the Big Island, so we sent a crew over the east side of the Big Island, but then it rained like crazy on the west side. On Maui, the problem was it was raining on the east side, but the west side was burning. There was a big fire, and I don't mean to laugh about it, but it's like, it's very hard to predict. I mean,
well, that's one of the big messaging things that we have is to make sure people don't focus on the exact track, because you can have impacts well away from the center. You saw that with the days of rainfall on the Big Island from Lane. You even saw that from Hector passing south of us with the high surf and road closures on Maui. So there's these impacts that extend well away from the actual tracks.
In your experience with hurricanes, is it usually the wind that causes the most damage, or is it flooding or storm surge, or it just depends, I guess?
Each hurricane's different. I always say they're like people, because each person's different, has their name, and they have a different name. So some hurricanes are wind events, Andrew or Nikki. Some are storm surge events like Sandy, and some are rainfall events, so each one's different. It all depends on the history, their track, where they're going, and so, yeah.
I would add that this is a combination of the rain and wind, but also the trees.
Yeah.
In a cell, there were heavy tree growths in the Puna area on the Big Island. And there was a long period of rain and high wind, and those trees became the hazard. I saw many miraculous examples of 5 or 6 trees falling within a foot or two of homes and not hit. It was amazing to me that we didn't have any loss of life because of the number of trees that were.
Has there been progress in dealing with that? I mean, because I know that the Department of Transportation was trying to, protect the road infrastructure, and Hawaiian Electric's been trying to protect the electrical infrastructure from these tree falls. Are we in better shape in that regard now?
Well, I would not say we're in better shape. We're addressing the issue all the time. After a cell, and this is observation, I don't know this because of my knowledge of the county, but I observed that the county cut down many trees that were near roadways. And of course, we're just a few years later, and the way albizia trees grow, it can be, I think, 20 to 30 feet a year. So we're just 5 feet later, and we have, trees growing to 500 or 150 feet again.
So you just need to be continuously working
It's a continuous problem with fast-growing trees.
Yeah, I do want to add that across the continental U.S., the vast majority of deaths that occur from hurricanes are from water. So it's either from the rain flooding or storm surge. So that accounts for about 90% of the deaths. Now, that statistic might be skewed a little bit after they incorporate the fatalities that occurred after Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. But that is what worries us, is the threat from water. And that's what really kills people during hurricanes.
If I could make a comment on that, I'll be general enough that my lack of memory will not affect the accuracy of the story. But during some of the storms in 2018, if they would have just moved 5 or 6 miles, the flooding danger, the danger to dams and flooding would have shifted from unpopulated areas and streams to dams that would not have been able to take a hold of the amount of water, and therefore there would have been dam breakage, which goes back to what Hero's talking about.
Dennis Wong, when it comes to flooding issues, is there stuff you can do to protect your house, or is it more? I mean, most of what you've got here is wind protection.
Yeah, hard to retrofit. I mean, there's some things you could do for flooding, especially if it's a repetitive flooding. And some of the places in Kauaʻi and Oahu, they get flooded repeatedly. So, you know, there's some things you could do. I mean, elevation is one, but that's a little expensive. One of the things they could do is build with flood-resistant materials, so that every time there's a flood event, they don't have to take out the drywall, you know, put everything outside and then rebuild everything. So that's one thing, flood-resistant materials. But the key thing too is everyone's got to know their risk, whether it be wind or flood, and no matter how strong you make your house, and we tell people how to make their house strong, still get insurance because there's always risks. So they need to get flood insurance if there's, you know, if they have any risk of flooding, and they have to have hurricane insurance if there's, you know, for the wind, you know, and a lot of people don't have that because the banks will require it if you have a mortgage, but once they pay their mortgage off, a lot of people they're taking the risk not having hurricane insurance.
If I may comment on that, the risk of flooding is determined by the rate. If you have a high rate of waterfall, you have a different pattern of flooding than if you have a normal, what you would expect the lower rate to be. And that means that as we get more storms like happened in Kauaʻi, where we had record rainfall over 24 hours, as we have more storms like that, and this happened in Lane on the Big Island, they had homes flood on sides of hills that didn't look even remotely like a place that would be a home that would get flooding damage.
Right.
And that is reflected in the fact that a high percentage, and I think it's between 25 and 35% of all flooding damage occurs outside of the predicted floodplain where you're required to buy flood insurance.
Lovely. Okay, so this is a question about preparation and resources and where you place things. Caller suggests leveraging the resources from each ahapua'a so that communities can take care of each other. Would the state be willing to provide resources per community so Hawaii doesn't end up like Puerto Rico? Interesting issue. I mean, is there enough decentralization of our resources for recovery that you don't have pockets of communities that are completely isolated and you can't get to it all for long periods of time?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. And this is a concept that we've been calling resilience hubs. And Mayor Caldwell actually released the resilience strategy for
It was a big part of his State of the City address.
It was, yeah, it was tonight. And one of the strategies that identified in there is to explore the concept of this resilience hub. It's actually what this caller is talking about is, are there places within each community that we can identify as a central location in which we provide additional resources, maybe have some kind of redundant power source there, solar energy source that would survive the storm and can provide energy for those folks who need power, you know, people who have medical devices, people who have those requirements. But as of now, we're still in the planning phases, and we're exploring how we might be able to do this.
Okay, so now we're about halfway through our show, and we have a lot of callers coming in with specific questions about prevention of damage. Where can we find someone qualified to do continuous load-bearing retrofitting? How much should it cost? What do you estimate is the cost of retrofitting an older home with hurricane clips, say a 1,200 square foot house? I think someone's asking specifically about their house.
Okay, we get a lot of those questions.
Can you get a sense of, you know, can people afford to do some of the things that you're talking about? And if you want to use some of the material you've brought with you.
Sure.
Dennis.
Okay.
So you mentioned hurricane clips. Let's start with hurricane clips.
Okay, well, let me just bring this prop up. Let's call this the mini house. Okay, so this is a typical double wall house. 2 walls. The outside, it's framed by 2x4 studs. The outside has siding. The inside has drywall. When they originally built houses after '88, they put in hurricane clips, such as this one. It ties the roof to the wall, top of the wall. So when there's a hurricane force, the roof doesn't fly off. Okay, so this is what's inside the house. Inside, after 1988 on Oahu, and you can see the dates differ for each island. If your house was built before '88, you could still retrofit it. And here's an example of a retrofit. Here's like what they call Hawaii plantation tie clip. They're only around 60 cents a piece. If you're a do-it-yourselfer, and especially if you're a one-story house, you could probably do it in 2 Saturdays. Probably $300 of material cost. Okay, that's if you want to hire someone. The person had a 1,200 square foot house. It's probably single wall. Imagine you could get some quotes, and they, if you want some leads later, the contacts probably under $1,500 to put in those hurricane clips. To do a complete load path. Complete load path not only ties the roof to the wall, ties the roof to the wall, to the foundation, and even then you could do a retrofit using structural screws, and it's in our in our University of Hawaii Sea Grant website.
Is this the book you're talking about?
Yes, this is the book. Okay, this is the Homeowners Handbook to Prepare for Natural Hazards. It's a free book online. Just Google University of Hawaii Sea Grant College Program, or Google Homeowners Handbook to Prepare for Natural Hazards. There's 25 partners in the book, a lot of Hawaii Emergency Management, City and County, National Weather Service, a lot of different companies and government agencies are all partners in the book, and it covers how to do a lot of these retrofits.
Okay, so quick question. Is your house like that?
I live in a high-rise.
Oh, okay. So you don't have to answer the question.
Rental house.
And what do you think? Are you like that? Do you know?
I think the house was built after 1988, so it has hurricane clips. I do not know if it has the
Good
floor.
question, though. If you're a renter and you're concerned, I mean, you're not just concerned because of the house. You want to know whether you're safe in the house, right? So maybe you're going to go back and talk to your landlord when you go home?
Probably, yeah.
And John Bravender, working with hurricanes all your life, are you all hardened up?
No, I live on a sailboat.
Okay, well that's
by the way, when the home I had on the Big Island, I had done it myself with a guy that worked with me and taught me the skills to do it. We had used hurricane clips and tightened up the home and made sure the roof stayed on. As I understand it, Dennis can talk this, but if you can keep the roof on a home, usually the home will do pretty well in the winds.
Once the roof comes off, it's very bad because then the walls don't have support. Everything comes inside, and the walls don't have support, and they're more vulnerable to be pushed over.
Are there? We talked a lot. You talk about a lot about topography and the effect on the winds and so on. You know, I was always surprised when I learned that one of the places the wind can be the worst is when you're at the base of a mountain.
Yeah.
Because the wind will go over the top and then comes down. The air pressure comes down.
Right.
Is there any way of knowing in advance whether your house is in a more vulnerable spot than another house?
There are topographic wind speed up maps for each island. So, and it's very generalized. It may not be block by block, but you could be able to tell roughly where you are, and you'll be able to see where the wind speed ups are.
So an average person could access that? Go ahead.
Well, that's all. Obviously, the wind accelerations are based on direction too.
Yeah.
So we're used to seeing trade winds out of the east-northeast, but they could come from any potential direction as a hurricane is approaching. So that's what could be particularly damaging from one direction might not be from something else.
Could I just? I'd like to comment on that. There's a story they tell in the South that communities will build picket fences and then the first hurricane will come along, and all of the pickets will end up becoming projectiles and missiles. And for the next 4 or 5 years, you will see no picket fences in that community. And then maybe over the next 15 years, you'll start to see a few. In 20 years, there'll be a lot of picket fences again. And the same thing is true with wind speed. If you think of on the Hawaiian Islands, we have some fairly strong trades sometimes. And those trades have these topographical features so that there's wind speeds probably a few times a month, maybe even, that are as high as some of the sustained wind speeds of hurricanes.
Well, and also,
but they're directional. Right. Now, if you change that direction, all of homes that have stood that for years and years and years are now facing a different threat.
So if your home's managed to resist strong natural winds or winds like trade winds for many years, it could come from the opposite direction. It's just like a tree that's leaning this way. All of a sudden, it's blown from this way, and now it's. On Kauaʻi in Iki, we were in Poipu, so you could actually feel and hear the wind completely 180 degrees, 360 degrees, changing direction during the course of the storm. So anything that was withstanding, winds going this way, got whacked the other way. And what I thought was kind of freaky was the palm fronds flying through the air. You know, sometimes, heavy end out. When we got down to our car, there was a palm frond through the back windshield, through the back window. I mean, so do you need to make sure that the foliage around your house is cut back? Does that create missiles that can really damage a house?
Yeah, you're supposed to take, every time there's a wind event, it doesn't even need to be a hurricane, because we see it with tropical storms or winds of that nature, but there's a lot of damage from trees. And so you got to make sure that the limbs from the trees, if they're overhanging your roof, you got to chop them or cut them down. And if there's a tree near your house, think about thinning it out so it doesn't act like an umbrella and catch the wind and fall over your house.
I've got a lot of questions coming in, and I'm trying to sort of sum them up.
Okay.
A couple of people from high-rise buildings facing the ocean asking what's the best way to reinforce glass windows and louvers from the inside of an apartment. That's a very interesting question. Can you talk a little bit about reinforcing windows? And you've got a couple of examples of stuff that works, right, with you?
Okay. In this handbook, there are 12 different ways to protect windows. The cheapest is plywood. The most expensive is impact-resistant glass, and there's different types of panel systems. So here's an example of impact-resistant glass. It's very expensive.
And I notice it's very heavy too.
Yeah,
that's about 5 or 6 pounds of window right there.
Yeah, it's gone through missile test, and that's one way to do it. There's some companies that are now putting impact-resistant glass in for homeowners.
Keep it flat, because we're gonna blind people out there. Yeah.
Then there's different things like plastic honeycomb panels. You could put these up like plywood. Plywood's very heavy, so.
Is this as strong as plywood?
This will pass missile tests, and there's a company now.
You're not talking about real missiles. You're talking about stuff flying through the air, missiles, right?
Well, to be past building codes, say in Florida, it has to pass what they call the missile test. So it's generally, they fire a 9-pound 2x4 at 34 miles per hour, and it has to hold the envelope, and then after that, they subject it to pressure tests, positive and negative pressure, and it has to still stay on. So that's what we mean that it's.
So when people are buying this material, what should they ask about it?
There's any type of window protection, except for plywood, they should try and see that it's been certified, it's passed the missile test. Specifically, it's called an ASTM standard.
And I want to go back to the question about the high-rise, and maybe Dennis, you can comment on what
Since
people can do.
you live in a high-rise.
And we discussed this too at your office.
And really, I think there's some challenges with providing window protection for high-rise buildings, and really you would have to work with your resident manager or with your association. But my recommendation would be to identify interior space away from windows that you can evacuate to. Bring all your supplies there. You know, for instance, I have interior hallways in my building and also interior stairwells. So those would be solid options for me to evacuate to during an emergency. But of course, we have to understand that the possibility of losing power is real. And so I'm on the 21st floor, and I'm relatively healthy with very few needs. So I can go up and down the stairs relatively easily. But you have to evaluate your own circumstances, and if that's going to be an issue for you, then you might need to consider options for evacuating to, say, a family member's house or a friend's house, and of course, as a last resort, to one of the public shelters.
And specifically to this question, can you reinforce a glass window from inside?
It's generally not done from the inside. So I don't know. I know people have tried to do it with plywood, but it's not really the preferred way to do it because it's going to crack the envelope. But getting back to the high-rise thing too, you really don't need to protect and especially if they're above 60 feet in height. Most of what you have to worry about is the windborne debris. That's what's going to crack the window. That's why you don't want to put masking tape on your window because flying palm fronds or wood pallets flying through the air. But that windborne debris is generally like 60 feet and below. You know, all the building codes, they generally don't require like window protection when you get above 60 feet. So if the guy's in a high-rise building, you know, do what Hiro says. Go into the interior space with and you know, make sure you have your supplies.
Okay. Okay, now a little bit more about aftermath, because we've been talking a lot about prevention and so on, but afterwards, you know, I got a question of, you know, how, you know, do we have enough shelters is needed, especially with all the homeless? I don't know what the difference between homeless and, I mean, we during one of the storms, there was a lot of homeless people that went into the gym at McKinley High School, for example, but do we have enough shelters for everybody who needs them, or should people just be planning to stay in their houses? You gentlemen?
Statewide, we don't have as many shelters. There's a big mismatch between the number of shelters that are sometimes predicted as needed and the ones that we have available. As a consequence, the counties, and I'll let Hiro talk about how he does it, the counties have specific policies about who should seek shelters. And it requires the homeowners to evaluate their own homes, their own circumstances. And so if you live in a home built after 1988 that's out of a flood inundation zone, almost certainly we would recommend that you shelter in place. If you're in a high-rise that's built with the strong architectural things necessary for tall buildings, they almost certainly will be good places to be, and you should shelter in place in those high rises. If you're in a medium size, probably as dangerous as any would be the 4 or 5 story apartment buildings. There are probably the ones that I would have to be considered. But I'll let Hiro his city and county has specific recommendations as who should seek shelter and who should.
Yeah, and I think Tom pretty much covered most of it, but really there's a significant difference between how we approach evacuations in Hawaii versus how they do it in the continental US. You know, they order, you know, for instance, I was in New Orleans right before Hurricane Katrina hit, and the mayor of New Orleans ordered mandatory evacuation a couple of days before the storm. And that means leave the city, go somewhere else. Leave areas that are potentially impacted by the storm. Well, we don't really get to do that here. We're on the island, and really not a whole lot of people will have the option to leave whatever island they're on before the storm impacts.
That's
So
right.
if we call for a mandatory evacuation, then that means we would have to provide some kind of place for people to go to. And right now, the statewide shelter inventory is probably wouldn't meet the demand.
Let me ask you, we have these tsunami inundation zones that are all mapped. Would those be the same thing you would follow? Could you follow that and get some direction about whether you should worry about storm surge? Is it a similar kind of inundation pattern?
That is a very good question. And there is actually storm surge modeling that's been done for Hawaii fairly recently. Because of the features of islands, the National Weather Service and the Hurricane Center, these guys are the best people in the world that do this. And they even had challenges in predicting where storm surge might go. So we recently got some modeling available. It is currently online, and I do have to provide some caveats to the models. It's a composite of hundreds of thousands of different scenarios, so no single storm will ever generate the surge that's depicted in this. Now, we're working with the National Weather Service to figure out how we can best communicate the hazard during a specific event. But there is a difference between the tsunami evacuation zone and where storm surge would impact. And it certainly depends on the strength and the forward motion of the storm that's approaching.
And you know, no one really checks this stuff until there's already a storm coming, right? I mean, that's human nature. Question was, what size generator would keep a fridge running? I think a lot of people believe, and I think this is probably true, is that in the end, most people will be alive, but they won't have electricity for long periods of time. What's our timeline on how long it would take to get electricity back? I mean, will some people be without electricity for weeks?
It depends on the severity of the storm and the nature of the storm.
Well, if we go back to the Iniki example, you know, Iniki hits Oahu.
I think I think there would be sections of the island that might be a month or two before we got electricity restored.
And then what's someone supposed to do about that if they're out there in the community with no power?
Well, that's why they're recommending, you know, the old guidelines for your emergency supplies was 7 days, but now they recommend 14 days or longer. And if you have the capability to, you know, have more, do it. But also there's like ways to stretch your supplies. I mean, like if there's a power outage, the first thing you're supposed to do is eat your things in the refrigerator.
Frozen stuff, yeah.
Then the frozen stuff, then the canned stuff. I mean, and you're supposed to have 14 days. So hopefully by then, you know, there'll be relief coming in, and it's all planning. And I know someone asked a question about the generator and the refrigerator. It's, you know, I think generally like a 2,000 kilowatt generator is sufficient to, or even some of the 1,500 ones are sufficient to run like an average size Energy Star refrigerator right now. You know, the key is like when you start them up, there's like how much energy you need to start it up and how much you need to run it. And generally it's like 2 or 3 times more to start it up. But a small generator should work.
And you know, this all seems really overwhelming, but I think my recommendation for preparedness is to don't do it alone. You know, go meet your neighbors, go work on it with your family and friends. You know, work on it as a community, because you can really share your resources, help each other.
And I'd like to pile on to what Hero said, and it goes back to what we all have said about the community. When a cell struck, I lived on a road that was about 2 miles long. There were maybe 500 trees across that road. I mean, it was, you couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't go see your neighbor. You couldn't go anywhere. And so I had prepared, and I was in a rural area, so I'd purchased gasoline, had a few cans of gasoline. So I pull out my chainsaw and my protective gear, and I go out and I start cutting the trees. And there were probably 15 or 20 neighbors along this road, and every one of them started doing the same thing. It was about 2 or 3 hours. I'd cut 2 or 3 trees, and all of a sudden a neighbor is coming another direction. So now there's 2 of you. And then pretty soon there's 4, and then there's 6. And in this 1.5 mile road with no big equipment, just us cutting trees with our chainsaws, it didn't take very long, and we had a road out to the main road. And then we started the same process on the main road. We found pickups. We took pickups out there. We found the guys with the bigger chainsaws. Now, that's just one thing, and that's debris, but that's the way communities work together. And we essentially had a road, we lived about 5 miles from Pahoa. We essentially had established a way to get into town in Pahoa before about the same time the National Guard arrived with all of its moving equipment to start moving in. And that's an example. To follow up on the 14 days, in 14 days, if you give emergency managers extra time, guys like Hero, and I'm providing goods for Hero, so I'm working with the FEMA people. If you give us extra time, every day you give us, we're getting closer to starting to bring food back in. So if you have, so it's a whole community using the supplies they have on hand, and if everybody has 14 days, that's pretty good, if you think about it. And if everybody is doing that, that gives us 14 days to work hard to figure out how to start distributing food that we're bringing in from other areas.
I think we really focused a lot on the vulnerabilities that we have here on Oahu and elsewhere in Hawaii, but really the strength is that sense of community. And here on Oahu, we have a number of community preparedness groups. So there's actually people in many Oahu communities that are really interested in working on disaster preparedness, and they're doing it together. So, not only would I recommend that people go make an excuse to go meet your neighbors, just go ask for a cup of sugar or, a cup of shoyu or whatever it may be. But also think about looking up some of these community disaster preparedness groups. You can go to our website, honolulu.gov/DEM, and find these groups and join up in the efforts.
Say that again slower.
honolulu.gov/DEM.
DEM, Department of Emergency Management.
That's it.
And then you mentioned, you were mentioning the wind maps, the wind speed maps. Where are those?
Those are, if you could Google Hawaii wind speed maps, you'll find them. I think they're with the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, or with the building code, the building code division also should have them. There's a specific website. If someone contacted me, I could get it to them. Yeah.
What about tourists? I mean, my experience has been as soon as something bad happens, all the tourists go heading for the airports, trying to get any plane they can. And I remember at one point, the airport was a particular vulnerability because they didn't have enough generators to actually get planes. This was back in the legal administration. They didn't have enough backup power to get planes loaded and fueled and in and out. Are we better now at that? I mean, the airports, will they be up and running quickly enough to evacuate the 250,000 tourists we've got on our islands?
Well, first, the airport's not a shelter, and I'll let Tom elaborate on some of this, but we actually work with the Hawaii Tourism Authority, and here on Oahu, we work with the Oahu Visitors Bureau. There's also a Hotel Security Association, HH Visa, Hawaii Hotel Visitor Industry Security Association, and they do an excellent job of preparing their properties and keeping their guests informed. So those are some of the larger hotels that we have here, but what we do need to address is the increasing number of vacation rentals and other smaller operations in which there is not a large organization behind them, like a hotel company, to provide the information and supplies to their guests. So I do see that as a gap area that we do need to work on.
But let me ask directly, do the hotels keep 14 days of food for all their guests aboard?
No.
So we're going to have to get them off the island. So how does good communication with your guests get them off the island? I mean, do we physically have the capability of getting them off the island is what I'm asking about the airport. That's why I mentioned the airport.
Yeah, and has been some planning efforts underway, and of course it's not just getting the tourists to the continental U.S., but also could be other countries as well. So there's definitely challenges in doing that. There's been some efforts going on with emergency management, the airports, with the consulates. But I don't know if, Tom, you can elaborate any further on the visitor evacuation planning.
Well, no, I can't. I can say that the taking care of the visitors is the first thing we have to address, and then we need also to address position of the hotels and the various places, how prepared they are.
Okay.
As Hiro said, in a physical sense, they're very prepared.
Okay, I've got to stop now. We've actually run out of time.
Wow.
Okay.
I know, fast. Anyway, mahalo to all of you for joining us tonight. And we thank our guest, Thomas Travis, Administrator of the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, Hirokazu Toya, who prefers Hiro, Director of the Department of Emergency Management for Honolulu, John Bravender, Warning Coordination Meteorologist for the Central Pacific Hurricane Center, and Dennis Wong, Coastal Hazard Mitigation Specialist for Sea Grant and UH Manoa. Thanks all of you. Next week on Insights, starting a business on Hawaii can be daunting, but there is lots of help available for those who dare to take the plunge. Join that discussion next week. I'm Daryl Huff for Insights on PBS Hawaii. A hui hou.